he bit the book?
Yeah, I went to go get it from downstairs, and my theory is because I was using a small piece of tinfoil as a bookmark that he saw it and then decided that it was some kind of food that he should try to eat. Um, but yeah, now I have it's hard to see it on the call, but also because it's a black book. But when you come here in person, I'll show you. There's very distinct like he took a couple tries to really.
Are you telling me that your dog ate your podcast homework?
Oh my god, yeah.
Hi, Sammy. How are you?
Hi, Rin. I'm good. I think I'm good. I'm suffering physically. Um,
Oof.
but that is what it is.
Quite frankly, I think you should just get an exemption.
I should. It's like, listen, these are parts that are going to go unused. If I could donate them to a good cause, I would. But we've had this conversation many times before.
And so we're having it on air for the benefit of listeners
Also,
instead.
like on this extremely horny podcast where we talk about all kinds of things. I don't know why I'm being bashful about saying that I'm on my period because that's what's happening. But it still feels like something that you shouldn't say. So
We literally opened our last episode with a discussion of the fact that we're both monster fuckers.
yeah, so I think we've crossed that bridge. Social constructs are fun.
Social constructs are a time. Uh, but thankfully, hobbits and elves are not subject to social constructs like gender or money. They just are.
I mean, not subject to them in the same way that we are, but how are you? How was your day?
I'm already missing the woods.
Yeah.
I was away for the a nice long weekend, dear listener, with visiting some friends and going to their wedding. Thankfully, that was out in the woods, and so I took a little walk on the AT and a little hike up a mountain and enjoyed the fall foliage.
Yeah, I wish I had gotten to hike. I was busy celebrating other important milestones, but yeah, I got home the next day and I was just baking. I baked apple betty and pumpkin squares. And I was eating apple cider donuts that I'd gotten the day before because I just needed to recreate the fall magic.
Yeah, I was thinking about making some pumpkin cinnamon rolls today, and I didn't end up doing that, so I might do that tomorrow. We'll see.
Oh, I like that idea.
Um, but beyond our culinary and worldly adventures, do we want to talk about the adventures that a bunch of hobbits are having?
I would love to talk about those adventures because we left off on a beefy section.
We certainly did. So, with that, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Fandom Apprentice, where we are today talking about the end of the Council of Elrond through The Ring Goes South. I am one of your hosts, your resident quote unquote Tolkien expert, Rin.
And I'm the other one, your resident apprentice, Sam. You're trying so hard to get us on topic, and I am just being silly. But you just listened to our last episode. So, where specifically did we leave off? I mean, I have a
I
general
did just
idea.
listen to our last episode. I was doing editing notes. But we left off specifically at the end of Elrond's tale, where he gives sort of a whole piece of the end of the last age, where Sauron was the enemy and a great alliance of men and elves, the free peoples of Middle Earth, came together to defeat him.
Hmm.
Just for context, that was 3,000 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. I remember we left off talking about how this guy's really fucking old.
Right. And he was old then. So this is it's been a long time since that all happened. Since the magical sword that Elendil wielded, Narsil, was shattered, and since Isildur failed to destroy the ring, and it passed out of knowledge and time, and now we're back with Boromir's tale. Thinking about them as Elrond's tale and Boromir's tale just makes me think that this is dark Chaucer.
This is edgy Chaucer. Yeah, and I was looking at my notes to see what little nuggets I had to contribute to this part. And what I have written is my eyes kind of glazed over because there's a lot of names and cities and stuff. But the main takeaway that I got from that story is that the sword that gets broken is the same one that Aragorn has.
Right, and Aragorn will reveal this very shortly. Yeah, so Elrond's story is long and essentially gives a whole history of Middle Earth, right? And so finally, now he gets to the end of his story, and Boromir gets up and goes, "Okay, let me talk about where I'm from, because you mentioned Gondor, and I'm from Gondor, and we happen to be right next to Mordor, so we should probably talk about what's happening.
Yeah, the two places that both end in OR sounds that are right next to each other.
And let's not forget the kingdom of Arnor to the north, which no longer exists, but
More like Arnorth, am I right? But
Ayo. But Boromir talks about the nameless enemy having arisen again.
mhm.
And this is not the same like nameless fear that Gloin mentioned. This is clearly Sauron.
Yeah, I didn't even make the connection that they were both nameless, but yeah, it's pretty obvious from the way he's talking that this is Sauron.
Right. Gloin, when he says the nameless fear, it's all lowercase. And when Boromir says the nameless enemy, both nameless and enemy are capitalized.
Mhm.
And we get a common speech name for the mountain Orodruin, which is the great volcano at the center of Mordor. And it's called Mount Doom because, of course, it is.
Which if this was anything if any modern thing had a name like Mount Doom, we would think that was so cheesy, but here it's just, it's played totally straight. It was original at the time and it super works.
Right? This is the novel that is the ancestor of all modern fantasy. And so you can't do this anymore without being like, are you, you know, you're both derivative of Tolkien and way too direct,
Yeah.
right? So really, like, only this could only be done by Tolkien.
Yeah. And it's kind of
Um,
refreshing. You don't have to interpret the meaning of some complicated name. No, it's just fucking Mount Doom, and you know exactly what's going to happen there.
Tolkien doesn't make a lot of distinctions between good and evil, or doesn't make a lot of like gray area between good and evil. Things are good or they are evil. And if
Mhm.
they're evil, they're dark and have names like Mount Doom and the Nameless Enemy and the Dark Fear. And and if they're good, then they're the kings of men, and they are, remembered in songs and histories, right? So he's very black and white about his morality and
Yeah.
about the sides that one is on, and every place also has a side.
That's interesting because we've obviously seen a lot of that already, but again, that just hadn't really occurred to me that the places, the Shire has a magic all its own. Elrond's house has its magic. We're also working with the forces of these places in addition to the people.
Right. Every we had early on, we had the one spirit of place in Tom Bombadil, where he was very like a very tangible spirit of place. But that doesn't mean that these other places don't have spirits and magic that manifest within them,
Mhm.
right? And we'll see this later in The Ring Goes South.
Yes. Yeah, I I
that
think I took some
oh,
notes to that
yeah.
effect.
Mhm. Um, but Boromir basically talks about, uh, they were holding the river against Mordor and its allies, and then a Black Rider came in the night, and they were just completely defeated and driven back across the river. And Boromir's brother got like a prophetic dream and told him to seek the sword that was broken. In Imladris it dwells. And there's a whole long prophecy. And so Boromir's brother, Faramir, wants to go, but Boromir takes it upon himself to go in his place, right?
And what was his reason for wanting to go?
Basically, because he got the vision. He he saw that, he was eager to heed the dream and seek for Imladris, but since the way was full of doubt and danger, I took the journey upon myself,
Okay.
is what Boromir says.
Well, that's a good brother. Good for him.
Right. And this is when Aragorn jumps up and casts his broken sword on the table and goes, well, here was the sword that was broken, right?
Mhm.
This is Narsil. I am Elendil and Isildur's heir,
Yeah.
which means that Aragorn is royalty, more or less.
Now, was this something that, because we've talked about this before, I don't remember if it was on the podcast or just personally in our conversations, but the so is he the royalty for Numenor or somewhere else? Whatever he's royalty of isn't really something that exists anymore, right?
He's Numenorian,
Mhm.
more or less, but technically, like, Gondor is a kingdom of Numenorians, of people descended from Numenorians, more or less.
Okay.
As and the Dunedain are sort of the remainders of the kingdom of Arnor, um, which was Gondor's sort of northern counterpart.
Mhm.
But technically speaking, that means he is also heir to Gondor because Gondor does not currently have a king.
Okay, so he does have a relevant player in the political worlds. He has stakes in something that is happening and not just, "Oh, yeah, this kingdom that fell a long time ago, I guess I'm related to these guys."
Right, but he is, it's kind of wild to think about because it has been, like we said, about 3,000 years,
Yeah.
right? If we think about, you know, royal families in our own world, like the British royal family that can more or less trace their ancestry back to William of Normandy, who came over and conquered England in 1066. So that's
Mhm.
not even 1,000 years. And that
Yeah.
was a long ass fucking time ago, right? So, and it really has been, multiple families that have ruled England through various descent and intermarriage and all of that. But 3,000 years is, even if the Numenorians like have magic in their blood and intermarried with elves and so live longer than humans in our world, that's still a long fucking time.
Yeah.
And Gandalf goes, well, we might as well answer the rest of Boromir's unspoken question. Let's bring out the ring here, shall we? And the ring is also known as Isildur's bane, because ultimately it's what led to the death of Isildur,
Mhm.
right? And Frodo is the halfling mentioned in the prophecy.
Oh, yeah, and the halfling fourth shall stand. There you go.
And so Boromir is like, shit, are we all doomed? And, is my city, is my nation doomed? And Aragorn says, "Well, no, not yet.
The prophecy didn't say it was your doom.
It just said it was doom."
That could apply to
Um,
anybody.
yeah.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
he
It'll be someone
literally
else's
says,
doom, I promise.
"But doom and great deeds are indeed at hand. There will be doom. I can promise you doom for sure."
Right. But Boromir's like not convinced of any of it. And so he kind of is being snippy about the whole thing, and Bilbo gets up.
I love this part where Bilbo talks.
Well, Bilbo gives the little verse that we saw in Bree, right? The all that is gold that does not glitter, not all those who wander are lost, which is, you know, every person with an REI membership's favorite little quote to cut out and put on a sticker somewhere.
Listen, as two REI members staring each other in the face right now.
I literally do own socks that say that on them, and
Yeah,
I'm
and don't you
pretty
also have
sure.
that on the picture frame,
Yeah, the one that my ex gave me.
which we have talked about on the podcast?
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, we are not immune. It's a good quote, but I do also think, the rest of the passage is worthwhile to have as well. No, not all that is gold does not glitter, not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither, deep roots are not reached by the frost. And then there's another verse, and Bilbo goes, "Well, it's not my best poem, but if you need more than Elrond is saying, then I guess that will have to do. You came up 110 days through the wilderness alone, which means he's been writing since July 7th.
Mhm.
And
That is quick
if the
math. Good job.
I have it written down.
Still.
We saw in our last episode that I have not been able to do quick math when I need to.
I was willing to give you
So
credit for it, though.
I prefer to be honest with our listeners,
That's very
upfront
noble of
about my
you.
lack of mathematical abilities. Where was I? Boromir has been in the wilderness alone since July 7th, and Bilbo's like, if you're willing to do that, like jump in the saddle the moment your people are driven across the river by a black rider and ride north like the gates of hell have opened behind you for 110 days, then you might as well fucking listen.
Yeah, it seems like a really weird time to suddenly be skeptical.
And I do love that Bilbo leans down to Frodo and goes, "I made that one up myself." He's
He
just
gets
so
that
proud of his work, and he
he gets
should
that
be.
from Gandalf. You come up with something good and you need to make sure that everyone appreciates it.
Exactly. Aragorn then sort of like finishes out his history, right? That he's the heir of Isildur, and he's not a great king. He is a wanderer and a warrior, and he has done much to keep the north safe, just as Boromir and the men of Gondor have done to keep the south safe. So they move on to Bilbo getting up. Boromir sort of leaves like one last question, being like, how do we know that this is the ring? How do we know this is actually Isildur's bane? How did it get here? And Elrond goes, well, why don't we let the halfling tell it? And Bilbo goes, but I'm hungry. Do I have to? And I love that he is just who he is. He still doesn't matter. He's gone on many adventures. It doesn't matter what's happened, what horrible things people are describing. He is still who he is.
And Elrond says, the quicker you get through this story, the sooner you can have some. It's like trying to get a child to do a chore. The faster you do it, then we can go have a treat. We can go get ice cream, which, from a child development perspective, I don't agree with using food as a bribe. But in this case, it is very effective. Well, no, actually, that's a lie. it gets him to start talking. It is effective in that he will do what Elrond is telling him to do and tell the story. But Elrond implores him to please make it brief, make it succinct. For the love of God, if you haven't already written a poem about this, Bilbo, you don't need to. You don't have to improv. Just tell us in plain words what happened. Can you do that? That was,
Which
it's, mhm.
finish your thought.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's like in The Good Place, um, when Michael needs Eleanor Shellstrup's file and he's asking Janet if she has a cactus. I do not have a cactus. I have the file. I will not tell a long story. I will keep it short. And then it says that Bilbo did not omit a single riddle from the story.
I do love though it, that's such telling Bilbo to keep it short, such bold words coming from a man who just told the entire history of Middle Earth to get to his point.
Yeah, that's a bit hypocritical.
And also telling Bilbo, "Hey, maybe don't tell a story." When like Bilbo's whole thing is telling stories,
It's
it's
not gonna
not going to
happen.
happen. I also like your comparison of this to like a parent and child type thing because Elrond, as we've noted, is 3000 something years old. And Bilbo, at his ripe young age of 128, is definitely about at that level to Elrond.
Yeah, basically a baby. And just to be clear, the story that he is telling, in case people haven't read The Hobbit or have forgotten, he's talking about how he acquired the ring from Gollum. And there's the riddle contest, and he sort of stole it. And that is not something that he had told his party originally. So to some people in the room, that was news, but some people already knew. But this is the first time that he's come out and fully said the whole story.
I do also have in my notes, we realized that, oops, he hasn't told Gloin how
Yeah.
he found the ring. Gloin does not actually
Surprise!
know.
Which, I
Um,
mean, at this point, it's not like Glenn's gonna be mad. It's not like anyone's gonna be mad.
right. I do like that Tolkien, even though we know that Bilbo is not keeping this brief, Tolkien thankfully keeps this brief. Tolkien basically goes like, Tolkien gives us a paragraph of Bilbo telling his story and basically sort of subtly goes, if you want that, there's a whole other book about it.
Mhm.
And you can go read the book. And then Frodo tells of his dealings, his travels in another paragraph. And I'm so glad that Tolkien did not reiterate all of this because we just read it all.
Yeah, and there's times where that kind of summary within a book is helpful. I think this is definitely one of those books where I appreciate any getting up to speed that happens, but I do a lot of much lighter sort of rom-com-y casual reading, and I hate when a very straightforward book constantly pauses to what's the word? Fuck. Summarize what just happened because yeah, we know that the girl's boyfriend got mad at her and they had a fight. We just read that. You don't need to summarize it again. This isn't War and Peace. It's not that complicated. Whereas this book is that complicated. So I do appreciate, even if it is just a very brief reminder of where we're at, that is genuinely helpful.
And I've even read like other like fantasy books where the author cannot resist summarizing everything and reiterating everything whenever there's a new character introduced or
Mm.
whenever that character is reintroduced. You can't just give a line of, oh, we've seen this character before. They have to give their whole fucking backstory.
You have to trust the reader. And we talked about this a little bit last time too of whether or not it matters to pay attention to every single name and understand every single thing. And I think that you have to trust your readers that they will follow the things that are really important. If you're doing a good job crafting your story, they'll be able to understand what's going on. And if they are able to pick up on other stuff, if they want to follow other threads, they can, if that enriches the experience. But you don't have to patronize them necessarily by telling them things they already know.
Right.
And I would say this
Right.
is very effective storytelling. He's a good economy of language.
Right. Even though he is very much a verbose author
Yeah.
who gives some very long pieces of description, he is at least trusting his reader to understand what he's saying and to pay attention to what he's saying when it matters.
And Bilbo makes a very cheeky little remark about how he could write a good book about Frodo's adventures so far after we've been reading the book about Frodo's adventures. So I like to think that that was Tolkien's little nod to himself of, yeah, this is a good book. I am doing a good job. Tolkien's little
That was
mini affirmation time inside his own story.
that was absolutely a little authorial moment.
Yeah.
But anyway, then we get the last piece of the puzzle. We get Gandalf.
Yes.
There is a whole section here where they're debating on whether or not this is the ring, like the one ring. What else could this be? And Gandalf basically goes, "Well, the 9 belong to the riders. We know that there's 9 riders. That's where they are. The 7 we've already been told are taken or destroyed. We know where the 3 the elves have are. So what else could this possibly be? We don't know of any other rings that he would want so badly as to dispatch all of his power, right?"
Hmm.
And then Gandalf confirms that the necromancer, who was the sort of not the villain of The Hobbit, but a villain mentioned in passing as perhaps a future problem in The Hobbit, is we get that confirmed that that is in fact Sauron. And this is definitely a choice that Tolkien made later,
Yeah.
right? And so Gandalf then continues his tale. Gandalf tells his tale about how he learned that it was the One Ring.
Hmm.
He asked for help from Aragorn. He sought out scrolls in the ancient libraries of Gondor. He went to Dol Guldur, where the necromancer was. He did so much research to make sure that this is not, please, all the gods, this is not the One Ring. But then it was definitely the One Ring because he finds out that there are words in the dark speech when the ring is hot. And so he took the ring and put it in fire
Hmm.
and found the words Ashnaz Gdortuluk, Ashnaz Gimbatul, Ashnaz Trakatuluk, Ag Borzum Ishi Krimpatul, which means one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. And to talk about words have power, right? Sam is just staring at me, listeners, as I
Well,
do some
you,
DM reciting here.
no, that, I mean, I'm always looking at you because this is also a visual medium for us, but you were seeming to have a thoughtful pause afterwards. I didn't know if you had a hot take.
I mean, my hot take is that words have power, and we've talked about this before, but the words have power so much that the sun seems to fade and the elves plug their ears.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That was my note, is that this viscerally upsets everyone in the room. And Elrond sort of chastises Gandalf for daring to speak them. And Gandalf basically goes, listen, there's going to be a hell of a lot more of this dark speech if we don't deal with this now. So consider yourselves lucky that you only had to hear a sentence or two. And let's get on with getting this thing dispatched.
If you don't all want to be speaking this in a few years, let's hurry this along, shall we?
Yeah.
And they talk about Gollum having all sorts of information about the ring, and they say, well, Gollum is thankfully behind bars and guarded by the elves of Mirkwood. And Legolas goes, sorry,
About
he's
that.
not.
Yeah. It just made us so sad to keep him in prison, and so we took him for little walks in the moonlight, and it seemed like a good idea.
And Gloin is like, "Why the fuck were you so nice to him, but not to me?"
Yeah. It's an old grudge.
And Gandalf goes, if all the grievances that stand between elves and dwarves are to be brought up here, we may as well abandon this council." And says, "My story's not done yet," basically. And after Legolas finishes telling exactly how Gollum escaped, Gandalf says, "We're not done." So I met Radagast the Brown, who is another wizard of the Order, back in June and told him about the Black Riders. And now Tolkien being so specific about time is helpful to us here
Mhm.
because we know now this coincides with when the warriors of Gondor were defeated at Ithilien and Boromir set out for Rivendell.
Okay.
So Gandalf then rides to meet up with Sauron the White, who is the head of the Wizard Order.
And it is very confusing. I know we've talked about things having similar names already, but Saruman and Sauron are really similar, and
We fuck
that's
up Bilbo
challenging.
and Frodo enough. I think we may need to add another counter for how many times we fuck up Sauron and Sauron.
And Saruman is sketchy. It seems like he has been keeping Gandalf from the truth because he gets mentioned a little earlier in the chapter. And then we hear a little bit more about him that Gandalf is going to him for help, but he's not really getting many straight answers. And it's just sort of everything about him is very sketchy.
I love The Fall of Sauron. I think it's just so well written. It establishes very quickly how well respected Sauron was
Hmm.
and how far he's fallen in just a few paragraphs, right? Gandalf notes very early on when he gets there, one, that he goes to Isengard and the Tower Orthanc within, and the door shuts behind him. And
Hmm.
that's when he starts to feel uneasy because those doors don't shut, right?
Yeah.
He feels trapped within. And he notices that Saruman was wearing a ring on his finger. The other question that came to me as I was reading this piece was, why the fuck do all wizards live in towers? And a piece of it is definitely because Saruman lives in a fucking tower. And so all wizards afterwards live in fucking towers. But I did do some research as to like where this came from.
Hmm.
And sort of one of the explanations that I found was, the idea of the wizard as the learned man sort of vaguely comes from like, old medieval learned men who oftentimes would study the stars. And so they would do that from their little astronomy towers.
That makes a lot of sense.
And so they'd have their laboratories and libraries up in the big tower where they could have their telescopes and look at the stars.
Hmm.
But we have a whole very quickly, it's we have a whole conversation with Sauron in which it's revealed he is gone to the dark side, right? He insults Gandalf, gets real pissed about being called by his title, Sauron the White, and then, insults Radagast, Radagast the Brown, Radagast the Bird Tamer, Radagast the Simple, Radagast the Fool. Yet he had just the wit to play the part I set him. For you have come, and that was all the purpose of my message. And here you will stay, Gandalf the Grey, and rest from journeys. For I am Saruman the Wise, Saruman Ringmaker, Saruman of many colors. And he reveals that his robe is no longer white, but it is made of all colors, woven. He has this nice little Technicolor dream coat.
Which is so magic makes you dramatic. That is so fucking dramatic. And is there a ranking system for the colors, or do these three wizards just happen to have their own colors in ascending order of brightness relative to power.
We
I
also
don't
have 2 blue wizards.
have we met 2 blue wizards, or do they just exist in the world? We
They
haven't met
just
them yet.
exist in the world.
Okay,
They are to the east, and we will not see them in the book. But there are 2 blue wizards, somewhere in the world.
interesting.
So,
But this is not like a system that we need to try to parse. It's just they happen to have colors.
we can parse more of it in the 2 towers when we actually talk more about this.
Okay.
But Gandalf tells Saruman, "I liked white better."
The sass.
The sass. Magic makes you dramatic.
Absolutely. It took me a minute to figure out what it is that's actually happening with Saruman because I was reading it thinking, okay, so he's teamed up with Sauron. But from what I'm understanding, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, he wants the ring for himself. He at least is under the impression that he wants it for himself. I don't know if he is actually being controlled by Sauron and then there's layers of intrigue, but he seems to think that he can also make a grab for this power.
Right. He thinks that the power contained within the ring can help him gain new knowledge and power. And Gandalf says, like, you can't use this thing. When I read sort of later pieces from Tolkien's Legendarium, you learn that Sauron, Saruman, Gandalf, Radagast, they're all the same type of being. They're all Maiar. They're powerful beings. But Sauron clearly has a level of power that the others can't quite match, not without destroying everything.
Mhm.
And so Gandalf basically says, like, Sauron's not gone. Sauron's not defeated. He still wields the ring. If you try to wield it, he will defeat you. He will take you over and corrupt you.
Yeah, just because it's not physically on his hand, he is still enacting his will through it, and you're not powerful enough to overcome that, basically.
Yeah, it's still a piece of his power. It's not a tool that you can wield. It is an extension of Sauron himself. But Saruman basically says, if you won't join me, then you can stay here on the top of a tall tower. And Gandalf becomes a damsel in distress, a princess in the tower, an anime girl.
Oh no. I've seen enough people doing sexy Gandalf cosplays, and I'm like, yeah, sure. That's not a big mental leap to make.
There's a Gandalf big naturals meme that went around for a while.
I think I know the one. Yeah.
Yes, Gandalf with big tits.
Amazing.
But thankfully, Gandalf told Radagast to get the eagles moving. And so Gwaihir the Windlord comes to check on Gandalf just by happy accident,
Mhm. Fancy seeing you
um,
here.
and takes him away. And so Gandalf goes to Rohan and gets a magic horse to help him out. Shadowfax, who is the favorite horse of the King of Rohan, who will certainly not be happy that Gandalf took that particular horse.
Yeah, just took the absolute best one.
Yeah,
And does he talk about why he picks that one? Just because it's the best, or did he have beef with the King of Rohan? Because I was not super focused. Like everything in this chapter, I feel like I have a lot of hand waviness of, I don't know, there was a lot of stuff because this was not the chapter where I was the most on top of the details.
I don't have it in my notes, but I do have. Yeah, it sounds basically like the men of Rohan are not evil, but they are dealing with the effects of being stuck between Sauron and Sauron.
Yeah. And
It's not a great place to be.
it looks like from what I was able to quickly skim that he chose Shadowfax because he's an amazing perfect horse and that the Black Riders horses can't compete with him basically.
Right. Um, and so Gandalf, having been imprisoned, is trying desperately to get back to the Shire. and finds that Frodo is gone. Frodo's already left. And so and he goes to Bree, finds that they had left Bree already in the company of Strider,
Mhm.
and then explains now he explains that the lights that they saw on Weathertop when they were in the marshes were in fact him fighting with the Black Riders. And then finally he makes his way to Rivendell only 3 days before the ring.
Mhm.
And then says basically, "I'm so sorry I took forever to tell this story."
But there was a lot of important information, so everyone kinda needed to hear it.
Right. An account to the ring bearer of so strange an event was required, I think. And the strange event in particular that he says is the fact that he didn't show up when he said he would.
Yeah.
Like, forget that he was held captive. The thing that he is super worried about is the fact that he did not show up when he was needed.
Mhm.
And finally, Elrond goes, "Well, that's bad."
Yeah, that's concerning. And then the council basically starts talking about, well, what are our other options at this point? Because Sauron knows the ring has been found, Saruman is a lost cause, and he's kind of starting to be aware of what's happening as well. And somebody pitches the idea of giving the ring to Tom Bombadil, which seemed
Who
at first,
has, once
oh,
again, many other names.
yes.
Yarwin ben Adar. He has, the names Yarwin ben Adar, oldest and fatherless, Orold and Forn, and many other names besides. He is a strange creature, and maybe I should have summoned him to our council. Gandalf says that wouldn't work.
Yeah. And this does confirm what we had talked about ages ago when Tom Bombadil first came up of, was his name always Tom Bombadil? We said, of course it's not. And this confirms that he has had many names as he pleases. But basically, what Gandalf says in response to the idea of giving it to Tom is that Tom just wouldn't care. Maybe if all the people in the world came to him and begged him, he might take it, but he just doesn't. It's not that he's not capable of understanding or that he's not intelligent, but it just doesn't matter to him in a way that means he could be trusted to keep it safe. That he would lose it and it would go off into the woods or something, and then things would be worse than before.
And we saw a little bit of this when we encountered him. Like, he took the ring and put it on and was totally unaffected by it,
Yeah,
right? And basically laughed and gave it back to the hobbits and was like, "That's a fun little trinket. Keep it safe."
yeah. So he's not going to treat this with the gravity that it deserves, which is not a slight against him. It's just his nature. He's not concerned with the ring.
I think it's interesting to think about almost from the lens of, like, climate change.
Ooh, interesting.
He is a being of the earth, right? The squabbles of mortals are more or less beneath him. He will continue to exist as part of the earth so long as an earth exists. And if that earth is not inhabitable, well, that's not his problem.
Hmm.
He'll still be there, just nobody else will.
Yeah, and the I want to say the mortals, but the mortals asterisk, the people, the men, if you will, they can't outsource their problem to Tom. They can't get rid of this responsibility for something that their type of being created. They're going to have to deal with it themselves one way or another. And they also suggest sending the ring across the sea or casting it into the sea. And I was wondering what the deal is with the sea, because I had always assumed that Middle Earth was the entire world. It was the planet in the same way that Earth is our Earth, which now in hindsight maybe sounds silly. But so there are other places that are very far away, but that kind of fucks up my whole perception of what's happening in the story, because I know we keep talking about there's bigger stakes, there's a grander scale, there's all of these other magical and cosmic things happening. But to think that this is all happening in just one part of a larger planet, for some reason that
Mhm.
really fucks me up more than thinking about all of the other big cosmic magical things, because I thought that this was the whole world that we were talking about.
The world itself is known as Arda, and Arda has undergone many great changes over the years. And at one point, we have the we previously had mentioned, right, that there was a being of whom Sauron was but a servant,
Mhm.
right? And at the conclusion of the war with that being, whole sections of Middle Earth completely sunk beneath the sea. And then following the war with the first war with Sauron, Numenor completely disappeared.
Mhm.
And further bits of land were completely destroyed. Also, the world at one point was flat and isn't anymore.
Oh, okay.
And so, but the elves can still treat it as flat.
I'm making a
So,
facial expression that doesn't really translate to audio, but the facial expression is what the fuck? How does he how do they do that?
yeah, the
How do they do that?
elves can still sail to the west over the flat seas and get to the Grey Havens, and to where they will dwell forevermore.
Okay. So if
But
I get on a boat with an elf and we go over the can they take me on the flat seas, or is it only an elf thing?
I'm going to say yes, they can, and we'll dig
Okay.
more into that at the end of Return of the King.
Okay, cool, because I'm envisioning all kinds of different logic puzzles of, okay, the elves can go, but can their ship go? Does the ship stop existing at the end of the world? What about the things that are on the ship? If they bring some food, what happens to the food? I need to know a lot of information about this, but I'll be patient. I'll put that on the back burner.
It's
Because
gonna
the
be a
sea is
little
literally
bit of
just one
time.
throwaway line, but it fucked up my perception of the settings so much. And I'm going to keep thinking about it. I don't know why it's that one little thing is troubling, but it
No,
is.
Middle Earth itself is simply one part of a continent in
Okay.
this world
Okay.
that, like, vaguely corresponds to Europe.
At some point, I'll look at a big world map and I'll just cry because I'll be overwhelmed by all of the other stuff. Because if this is all happening in just one part of the world, what the fuck is going on in the rest of the world? This has to be such a troubled place. But I guess it is. And I guess that's the whole reason that we're here.
There are stories that Tolkien has written that deal with other parts of the world. We also have in this chapter, Boromir talks about men who came from the south, from below Mordor, and from the east, who were allied with Mordor,
Hmm.
from the deserts to the far south, and from the plains to the east, and they came and they work alongside Sauron the Dark Lord.
Um, Basically, after that, they just all agreed that the only option is to destroy the ring. And Bilbo wants to go and wants to help, and that is a terrible idea, and that gets shot down. So Frodo accepts the burden of destroying it. And then Sam is going to go with him, which is very cute, very sweet. Which, I mean, it's not a surprise. Obviously, we know that Sam is going to go with him, but
Right. There is basically, two whole pages of debate of whether or not they can they use the ring? How do they destroy the ring? Who's going to go with the ring? Um, are there other weapons that we could potentially use? And finally, they basically go, no, we have to destroy the ring. And we have to send some people to go and help with it. And Bilbo goes, great. Can I have lunch now? I'll go take the ring to Mordor if you fucking give me lunch.
and I thought that was a little bit presumptuous the way that, because that basically is Bilbo's tone of, "Oh, fine, I'll do it," in sort of the long-suffering old man way, but also in the big production of a mom going, "No one ever helps me around this house" way of course the ring is my problem, of course I'll do it. No, the ring is Frodo's problem. You gave it to Frodo. Frodo is very clearly taking ownership of this situation. And I don't know, it just seemed a little bit, yeah, like I said, a little bit presumptuous that he would be the ones. No, his adventuring days are done. You have passed this on to a new person. He's got it under control. There's a little bit maybe of ring magic evil influence there of, oh, if I go on the quest, then I get to be with the ring, and me and my bestie the ring, BFFs forever, we'll go to the Mount Doom together. There were just a lot of layers of vibes to his comment that I thought was interesting.
That's fair. I didn't necessarily read it that way, but I mean, I guess I read it in a similar fashion of just like he feels still that he is the ring bearer. That
Hmm.
because he found the ring, it is still a part of him. And it will always be in some ways. But Frodo is now the ring bearer. And Elrond almost says as such, right?
I think this task is appointed for you, Frodo, and that if you do not find a way, no one will.
Exactly. I was about to read the exact same quote. The only other piece that I have from this chapter is just another little bit of Tolkien editorializing
Oh, do tell.
where Gandalf says to Bilbo basically, "You're not going to go. You are going to write this all down though. Finish your book about your travels and get ready to write a sequel."
Hmm.
Which is basically what Tolkien had to do is he finished the book about he finished The Hobbit, the book about Bilbo's travels, and then his publishers went, "You want to do another one? Please?" And he went, "Fuck, fine, I guess."
Very cheeky. And I don't want to dwell too long on this chapter because we still have a whole other chapter to get through. But the very end, where Sam is insisting that Frodo not go alone, um, Elrond is making his big proclamation about Frodo, you're going to go. This is your thing. You're the ring bearer. Congrats. And then Sam says, "But you won't send him off alone, surely, master," cried Sam, unable to contain himself any longer and jumping up from a corner where he had been quietly sitting on the floor. "No, indeed," said Elrond, turning towards him with a smile. "You, at least, shall go with him. It is hardly possible to separate you from him, even when he is summoned to a secret council and you are not." And like we had talked about last time with Sam being unnoticed and uninvited, this is a very explicit acknowledgement of that, which we
Right,
haven't really gotten up to this point.
right. He's, as a servant, treated essentially as part of the scenery until all of a sudden he inserts himself into the conversation, which he wasn't supposed to do. Elrond is not unperceptive,
Hmm.
right? I'm sure that he and Gandalf at least know Sam is there, right? And probably Frodo and Bilbo do too. But they all of them were just going to ignore the fact that he was there
Yeah.
because this is all matters that are above him.
And he was willing to violate that social contract that he also perfectly understands. He knows
Mhm.
his place within this system, and he's willing to step out of line to advocate for Frodo, to make sure that he's not going to be alone and that he has the opportunity to go with him. And there are other things because I read a little bit ahead of where we get today, so I don't know if we'll hit it this chapter, but there are other things that he does where he makes a point of breaking out of his role as the servant, as the yes man, to make sure that the things he cares about get their advocacy. And I think that's really sweet.
That's gay love.
It is.
So do we have anything else for the Council of Elrond? Because God, that was a beefy fucking chapter.
No, I really want to be done with the Council of Elrond because I feel like there was a lot where I was just going, yeah, I didn't understand that. That part went over my head. Please explain it to me. I felt like I was on much firmer ground with the next chapter, so I'm very eager to be done with this part so I can feel smart again.
Fair enough. And I actually didn't have a ton of notes for the Ring Goes South. To me, this is the Ring Goes South was a little bit of the D&D travel sequence.
Yeah, it's a fairly straightforward chapter, and that's why I felt really confident with it. Because I'm smart, I'm a good reader, I can understand things. But the Council of Elrond is so dense, I just want to put it behind me as quickly as possible. And immediately, my very first note was, I'm sorry to instantly take it in a horny direction, but I can't see the words "the ring goes south" without being like, Yeah, there's some rings that can go south for sure. Maybe not this one.
Sauron's cock ring.
Listen, there is so much. Wait, I have to Google something real quick. Yeah. There's so many. Why? Tell me why the first result is on Etsy. Etsy is not a place you should be buying sex toys, please. Oh my god.
Friends, please don't buy your sex toys from Etsy or from Amazon.
Yeah, just don't. Oh my god.
Don't buy
Yeah.
anything from Amazon if you can do it, but like especially don't buy your sex toys from Amazon.
Okay. And okay, so even better. So there's the various purchase options, but then there's a Reddit thread from 3 years ago that is, would it have been possible for someone to use the One Ring as a cock ring? Any thoughts on this matter? And there's not that many comments, but yeah, so it's not just me, but that is immediately where the title took me, and I'm not sorry about that.
That is our brand, and I think we've let that slip in the last couple of episodes. Is we do need to make sure that we are talking about um, as much horny bullshit as we can slip into this book.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I need to move on. I need to move on from that because otherwise we're not going to get anywhere. But so in terms of the actual plot, the hobbits have their own debriefing meeting after the war council. And
And Pippin is a teen. Pippin is
yes,
so obviously a teen.
the Pippin quote is the first non-ring related thing that I have written down, which is he's insisting that he should go. And he says, "We hobbits ought to stick together, and we will. I shall go unless they chain me up. There must be someone with intelligence in the party." "Then you certainly will not be chosen, Peregrine Took," said Gandalf. Ice cold. And this,
Amazing.
we
I
are
love this
really
little antagonism they have going on.
brain cell. That is literally what I was about to say, that this is the beginning. I mean, we've had their little sort of comments before, but we're about to really settle into a pattern where Pippin is just a thorn in Gandalf's side for the rest of forever.
And I can't tell if like they actually dislike each other or if it's one of those like Pippin actively dislikes Gandalf and Gandalf is like that's cute. Or if Gandalf actively dislikes Pippin and Pippin is like, but we're just having some banter. Uh
The little finger guns, absolutely something Pippin would do.
yeah, this isn't a visual medium, but I was in fact doing finger guns during
I
that
mean, we're both bi. We should just be assumed to be doing finger guns at any given moment.
a good amount of the time. Um
But then there's more Hobbit talking, and Bilbo is salty that Frodo chose his birthday to air quotes honor him, both by setting off on the journey. He thinks that's okay, that's a little bittersweet, that's a little weird, but most importantly, he is like, you let the Sackville Bagginses, the SBs, he doesn't even say their name, he abbreviates it. You let those motherfuckers into my house on my birthday.
I mean, to be fair, if Frodo had not been in the picture and Bilbo had made his disappearance on his 111st birthday, the Sackville Bagginses still would have gotten into the house then.
True.
Frodo just delayed it by 17 years and
Yeah.
made sure that Otho was good and dead.
He did what he could, and I appreciate any Sackville Blaggins, Sackville Baggins. I was gonna say slander, but it's not slander because it's true. Putting them in their place and reminding everyone that they suck.
They are literally the worst.
And
We have
then,
one little poem
oh yeah, yeah,
of which I think about this every single year.
okay,
When I like so I went to college somewhere where it gets very cold and snows quite a bit. And I do mean like very fucking cold. Like I think my freshman year it hit 35 below
hmm,
during the winter for like 1 or 2 nights. It was real rough. And that's 35 below Fahrenheit, but also that's relatively close in Celsius because I think -30 is where they match up again.
oh, interesting.
When winter first begins to bite and stones crack in the frosty night, when pools are black and trees are bare, 'tis evil, in the wild to fare. But I'm afraid that will be just your luck. And that's exactly how I imagine Bilbo saying it is like, he has this gravitas as he's reciting his little piece of poetry and then immediately out of that.
Yeah.
Um, have you ever been winter camping
I have not, no. I have only been camping in very pleasant, mild early autumn weather.
except for the pouring rain that you've gotten yourself into a couple of times?
Oh, yeah, except for the terrible, terrible rain. I think my subconscious blocked that out, but mostly pleasant weather. Not surely not rain so bad that I had to sleep in my car in the middle of the night because it was getting in through the rain fly.
I've
Certainly
also
not.
had 1 or 2 of those situations, but,
Well, you had a
I
far worse rain situation, but I have a feeling there's a
yeah.
cold camping anecdote.
I it was really just the one time when I woke up and there I had put my boots outside of the tent, um, and there was snow in my boots in the morning.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was rough.
Was that around this area where I live, where you also lived as a child? Or was that somewhere else? So I
Um,
can't imagine it getting that. I mean, it
I
snows
mean, it
here
was also,
sometimes.
like, late November, I
Okay.
think, so there was that, and I wanna say it was up in, like, the Blue Hills, it might have been the White Mountains,
Hmm.
not 100% sure. We have been explicit about the fact that we're New Englanders before.
Yes.
If you couldn't tell by how much I use the word "fuck." Anyway, let's see. Do, 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 do. But yeah, I think about this piece of poetry every single year. Like on those mornings when you step out and you feel it on your face, and it's the first time that you feel that, right?
Hmm.
Like the wind, something biting, right? I think about this piece of poetry every single year.
I love that. That's great.
When winter first begins to bite, and you go, it's only going to get worse from here, isn't it?
Hmm.
And I kinda love it because I'm a winter girly. I absolutely love it when it's freezing fucking cold. But I do also acknowledge when I'm trying to walk to my bus in the morning that that sucks.
That is something that I've been kind of missing as climate change has slowly encroached and fucked up all our lives. Is I remember there being days starting in, maybe November if it was a particularly cold year, where it was just dangerous to go outside because of how
Mhm.
cold it was, even without the wind. Just the fucking freezing, below freezing temperatures, that being enough that it hurts your face to step outside. And I've had so few of those days in the last couple of years. It's very strange.
Right, I remember getting emails in college from, the outdoor activities director, who basically was like, "Hey, in the time that it takes you to walk across campus, you can get frostbite. So, here's how to protect yourself. Don't leave your skin exposed. Wear fucking hats and gloves and scarves. Be careful. Take care of people. Take little detours into buildings. Keep an eye out for your fellow students, right?"
Hmm.
So, yeah, just a reminder that nature is not necessarily our friend. It's an uncaring mistress. But yeah, they're set to move out in the winter. There's scouts going out, so they don't end up leaving until early December. But we do finally get the forging of the fellowship.
Yes. And I had a quick little thing, which I know we're trying to be efficient with our time, but there was one Gandalf moment that I wanted to highlight where, we're talking about who's going to go. And Gandalf says, I think I shall come with you. And then going, don't get too excited. I said, I think I'll come with you. Oh my God, calm down. And that prompted me to ask, is Gandalf a middle child? Because that's some middle child bullshit. To say a perfectly innocuous sentence, realize that it got a lot more attention than expected, fan the flames of that attention completely unnecessarily. I don't know if he has siblings, but that's a middle child energy.
I mean, I guess we could count Saruman and Radagast as siblings.
Yeah, then in that case, there we go.
Saruman was oldest and wisest of the order, right?
Hmm.
So, fair enough.
But yeah, we formed the new company, the Nine Walkers versus the Nine Riders, for nice
And,
poetic symmetry.
now I think most listeners of our podcast probably will know who the members of the Fellowship of the Ring are, but just for anyone who's reading along directly with us or using us in place of reading the Fellowship, which I understand fully, as we talked about last time, it's not the most approachable of books always. We have, of course, Frodo, Sam, and Gandalf. And then representing elves and dwarves and men, we have Legolas, Gimli, son of Gloin, and Aragorn, son of Arathorn. And Legolas is the son of Thranduil, who canonically fucks.
Mhm.
And I will just say that every time we mention Thranduil.
I think you should. I agree with that.
Yes, Thranduil's official title is Thranduil, who canonically fucks.
Somebody who
Anyway,
knows how to write Elvish, please get on that.
yeah, someone want to print that in Tengwar. Um,
That could be my next pillow that I embroider for you. I can file that away in my brain.
Thranduil, king of the elves in Mirkwood, who canonically fucks. I will just for the listeners. I also have a pillow embroidered by Sam that states that getting railed by Norse gods is my special interest.
And it's true. It is.
And it is. We're not going to elaborate on that. We are simply going to continue.
It's pretty straightforward. It is what it says on the tin. But yeah, so
Or
is that
on
all
the
our
pillow, anyway.
So is that all the members of the company?
No, it's not. We also have Boromir, because he is going in the same direction to return to Gondor, and Aragorn will eventually split off and go with him.
Mhm.
And then Merry and Pippin, because they basically say they will follow along unless they are tied in sacks and sent back to the Shire. And
Yeah.
even then, so Elrond goes, "Well, I'm not going to fight that."
He tries. He sort of vaguely says, "Oh, Peregrine should stay. My heart is set against his going." And then Pippin says, "No, you're going to have to tie me in a sack and ship me back home because that's not going to happen." And he goes, "Okay, fine." And it says that he sighed after he says that. He says, "Let it be so then. You shall go," said Elrond, and he sighed.
And Gandalf too, like, stands up for Pippin, basically saying to Elrond, "It doesn't matter if you were to give us like powerful warriors, Glorfindel or another elf lord. We don't know what we're going into. So even if they have power, it's basically useless. We can't prepare for this.
Mhm.
And we're not using any of that power. We're trying to be quick and quiet. So ultimately, these two little hobbits are going to be as effective as any powerful sword arm you put in our party."
Yeah.
Which, speaking of powerful swords, the shards of Narsil are reforged into Anduril, the Flame of the West.
Hell yeah. And it turns out all beautiful and shiny. And other than that, it's kind of anticlimactic. I didn't realize that they could just fix it. I thought they would have to go on a quest in order to fix the sword, but nah, they just needed some elven smiths to get it looking good again, and then you're good.
Right. That's not the point of the book.
Yeah.
But speaking of broken swords, Frodo's sword that he took from the Barrow Wights was broken in the fight with the Black Riders.
Mhm.
So Bilbo gives him Sting.
He does. He gives him Sting and he gives him his dwarf mail shirt. And I love so much about that. Bilbo says that he has kept all of the really significant mementos from his adventure, besides the ring, obviously. And Sting and the mail shirt are from such different points of Bilbo's journey that we kind of get the whole thing symbolically represented because Sting was, he got it out of the troll cave at his very first confrontation with danger. When he uses it to kill the spider, that's when he really changes as a person and steps into his new role as the burglar, as the adventurer, when he's starting to be more brave. And then the shirt he gets when they're finally under the mountain and Smog is gone and they're getting ready for their final battle and his friendship with the dwarfs and then his enmity with the dwarfs when Thorin is being stupid and kicks him out and then comes back, and these items just represent such important parts of his life. And now he's passing
Mhm.
them along to Frodo. And then he says, "Just a plain hobbit you look," said Bilbo, "but there is more about you now than appears on the surface. Good luck to you."
And then he gives a little. a little song, which is so sad but really wonderful.
Oh, I wrote down the last stanza of it. Yeah.
Um,
I wanna talk about this one.
I want to talk about just the first stanza, and then I sit beside the fire and think of all that I have seen, of meadow flowers and butterflies in summers that have been. And it continues on about, all the wonderful things that he's seen in his life, but at some point, when winter comes without a spring that I shall ever see, his life will end, his story will
Mhm.
end. The last stanza that you wrote down, do you wanna read that one?
Sure. But all the while I sit and think of times that were before, I listen for returning feet and voices at the door. That just crushed me because, yeah, it's talking about how he's contemplating the inevitable end of his life and something about the listening for returning feet and voices. He is not sure if he's going to hear them. Eventually a spring is going to come that he's not going to see. Eventually he will be listening for people to come back and they just won't. And that'll be the end. And he might be facing the end of his life alone. And, he has to make his own peace with that and he has to be content with the journey that he's been on. And it's
And the fact
beautiful and
that
it's reflective and it's peaceful, but it's also so sad.
right, and the fact that can't necessarily he can't be sure not only that he will live to see people come back, but that they will come back at all.
That his loved ones will live to come back.
Exactly, right. Anyway, we learn about the gear that the company, which is capitalized as the company, we learn
Mhm.
about their gear and everything they took with them, in a very Book of Numbers core, um,
Book of
passage.
Numbers score. That's my aesthetic.
We
That's
had
the
that whole
best thing
discussion last time
ever.
about the Book of Numbers, and then as soon as I read this page, I was like, "Oh, that's what this is, isn't it?"
Yes. I was at, a temple service this past weekend for a bar and bat mitzvah for 2 kids that I used to take care of, and part of the reading that week was the tail end of Numbers, and I was so happy. It's like, "Yes, Numbers." And I was really expecting it's possible that it's there and my eyes just glazed over it and I will look like a real fool right now, but I didn't see the "You have my sword and my axe," whatever. I thought that was a scene that was very is that just in the movies?
That's in the movies.
Okay, because I was sitting and waiting so patiently and feeling a little bit smug going, "Aha, this is one scene that I know. This is gonna come up." It did not happen, and I was really expecting it, and I was surprised when it didn't happen.
They did have to condense quite a bit. As we've
Yeah.
noted, like, we've talked about these books for hours now,
Mhm.
chapter by chapter. The Lord of the Rings movies, the Peter Jackson films are long, but they can't be that long.
Yeah.
But they set out, and one other line here that I noted was Sam going, "Rope," he muttered, "no rope. And only last night you said to yourself, 'Sam, what about a bit of rope? You'll want it if you haven't got it.' Well, I'll want it. I can't get it now." And this is why D&D players always have 50 feet of coiled rope.
He didn't start out with the basic adventurer's kit, which also doesn't include torches, which we will get to at some point in the future. But I had written down the line right before that where it's listing all of the things that Sam has packed and some of the
Mhm.
things that he's loaded up on their horse, which is the same horse that they got in breed, still going strong, which he has named Bill.
But I love that he's named the pony Bill, because it
Mhm.
was Bill Ferny's pony, and now the pony himself is Bill.
Yeah, he's wearing the name much better than his previous terrible owner. But Sam loves Bill. He's a very good horse owner, horse companion. I feel like Sam would be one of those people who would it would make him sad to talk about owning an animal. So he would just go, "No, I'm his friend. I'm his caretaker." Sam loves this Bill. But the thing that I had written down was that he had packed various small belongings of his master's that Frodo had forgotten and that Sam had stowed to bring them out in triumph when they were called for, which is a feeling that I deeply relate to as a childcare worker who always has to think ahead to what are the 17 snacks that this person is going to want and three whole changes of clothes and all of the little things that the tiny humans aren't going to realize that they need, but they're going to need. And then I'm going to be the hero when I have all of these things. Yeah, I feel that.
The other piece of that that I really like is, he had his chief treasure, his cooking gear, and the little box of salt he always carried and refilled when he could.
Mhm.
Because food is so important to hobbits
Yeah.
that he always has his little box of salt to just make things better. So you always have to season your fucking food.
And I relate to that
Season your
because
fucking food, people, with more than just salt.
yes, but salt is important. And on a quite literal level, I have taken to traveling with a small, tiny little glass Pyrex container of salt because I can't count on the Airbnbs and relatives and whatever places that I stay for those kitchens to have kosher salt. They're going to have weird Morton reduced sodium table salt or seven different crunchy kinds of sea salt. And if I'm trying to bake, I need good, normal, kosher salt
I also do the same thing.
because we're the same person.
Uh-huh. So, yeah, no, it's important to always have the right fucking salt.
Yeah,
Not all salt is created equal,
no.
and real bakers know this.
Mhm. So,
Anyway,
yeah, the party
um,
gets ready to go. Elrond sends them off with some terms and conditions,
I have
emphasizing,
mixed feelings about this.
okay, let me finish my thought and then you
Yeah,
can do your thought. Um,
please.
But so he sends them off with terms and conditions, and he really makes a point that nobody besides Frodo is bound to do anything. Nobody's made any vows. No one is expected to see this entire journey through. And if they need to take a little break, if they need to leave early, whatever happens, happens. And there he's not going to hold it against anyone who either doesn't want to or isn't able to make it through the whole quest. And that prompts a little back and forth about loyalty and bravery and what you can reasonably expect people to be willing to do. And, of course, we're brave. We're going to see this through. But a lot of you haven't seen adventure yet, and you don't know what you can handle until you're tested. And it was a very interesting little back and forth.
Yeah, yeah, on the one hand, I understand what Elrond is getting at. Basically saying, yeah, we're not going to expect you to go and do something that there's no way you can do. I'm not going to make you make an oath that you cannot uphold. But also, it's real shitty to basically look at Frodo, who is the least adventurous out of anyone in this fucking party, perhaps besides perhaps Sam,
Mhm.
and go, "You're the only one who has to do this, and everyone else can just say fuck you and leave whenever they want."
Yeah.
Even though we all decided that you needed help on this adventure, and all of these people volunteered to go help you.
Mhm.
And I think it's a lot to expect Frodo to, if all of these others were to abandon him, it's a lot to expect Frodo to then be the only one who will eventually take the ring to Mount Doom and cast it into the fire.
And how would he even do that as one person? It's impossible. He needs help.
If Isildur couldn't, and Isildur was a great hero and warrior, how can you expect Frodo to be the only person who is bound to this task?
Mhm.
I feel like, the were I Elrond, the task I would have laid upon them would not have been, take you are all bound to take the ring to Mordor. It's it would have been much more of, I am asking you all to do anything you possibly can to ensure that Frodo is able to complete his task.
Mhm.
for the good of all of us. You have agreed to represent the free peoples of Middle Earth in this task. So see it through as far as you can. You
Yeah.
know, don't necessarily, you can still have the like, if you hit something that you can't overcome, you can still leave. But in leaving, leave Frodo as able to complete his task as you possibly can.
Because that's still a good quest. That still has stakes. That's still a huge responsibility, but it doesn't leave Frodo to the metaphorical and literal wolves.
Yeah. And then we have the travel. We get a marching order for the party as we set out, which makes my little DM heart happy. I know where to put the monsters now.
Oh, yes, this is all just very classic. There's walking, there's taking watches, there's the things people see in the night, there's their little perception checks. This is all so D&D.
Gandalf, who is the DM stand-in, the DM PC, says they aim to pass the mountains on the Dimral Stair, which was mentioned earlier in the chapter that the scouts had previously passed over on their way back. And he starts laying out the whole path and then goes, maybe we shouldn't plan too far ahead. And Gandalf and Aragorn talk about a potential dark, secret way that they've spoken of. And oh boy, I wonder what that could be.
Hmm.
Any guesses there, Sam?
Could it possibly be going through the mines
The Mines of Moria that we've talked about several times so
at
far?
length?
Yeah. And Tolkien mentions it getting, as cold almost as the winter when the Brandywine froze over and the White Wolves came into the Shire. And he's mentioned this before, but he finally gives it a year now, 1311, in Shire reckoning, which was
Mhm,
30 years before the events of The Hobbit, which was when Bilbo was 50. So he would have been a teen of 20, even younger than Pippin is now.
mhm.
Also, it's heavily implied now that Bilbo is the oldest living hobbit.
Yeah, I don't see any other way to interpret that because he's the only living hobbit who remembers the
That
wolves
event.
crossing into the Shire. So, I mean, unless there was anything else, anyone older than him who was alive would have also remembered it. So if he's the only one who
Right,
remembers it, yeah, he's the oldest.
right. Yeah. So Bilbo is getting on in years, and it makes total sense that he is perhaps looking towards a winter in which he will never see the spring. Also, in a literal sense, but also, now that I think about it more, Bilbo is everyone not in the party, staying home, looking out at a potential winter, a potential season of unending darkness where they will never see the light ever again if Sauron is victorious.
Mhm. Cheerful.
If the company does not return, if those voices at the door do not come back, then the voices Bilbo is hearing at the door might be in that speech of Mordor.
Oh, no. I hate that. Oh, that's terrible.
You're
That's awful.
welcome.
Thank you, bestie.
Anyway, they start going up Caradhras. Caradhras? I'm not
I'm avoiding
100%
trying to
sure.
pronounce a lot of these words because I have not the foggiest idea.
Well, there is a lot of fog on Caradhras, so you might get foggy ideas from attempting to go up.
Hey. But speaking of the miserable cold and the long winter, it does start to snow and it sucks. And all of the traveling up to this point has sucked and it's been miserable. And Sam wishes he could enjoy the snow from the comfort of his bed on a nice, cozy day. And I just assume it's implied that Frodo is also in his bed because that's how I was interpreting it. They're having their nice little morning tea, their little hot chocolate, snuggled up in their little bed in their hobbit hole. That's what I will choose to believe. And
I'm gonna
just
choose
as
to believe that one too.
good, you should, because I'm right. And just as I was thinking how stupid it is that Gandalf hasn't done anything in this entire time to make them more comfortable, he finally pulls out some drugs to make everybody in a little bit of a better mood, and then finally helps start a fire after watching everyone else struggle. So that's good.
Mirvor.
Yeah. Get me some of
Miravor,
that.
the cordial of the elves, which I've attempted to make cocktails to mimic this before. Um,
What did you put in them?
I think technically the one I made for the Hobbit party, I had titled as Ent Draft based on the
Mhm.
descriptions given later for that. Miravor, I've used like honey and mead, and I have used gin because the elderflower liqueur and the elderflower tonic as well because that it's just nice and somewhere between fruity and herbaceous.
Mhm.
I think my experiments need a little bit more, but I almost saw this as this is a bit of an alcohol jacket
Oh,
that
yeah,
Gandalf
for
is
sure.
giving them. Also, we get another time stamp through Frodo's dream, right? Frodo is saying he's dreaming about going back and telling Bilbo about it, about the snowstorms. And
Mhm.
Bilbo's saying, snowstorms on January the 12th. There was no need to come back to report that. But there's our timestamp,
Yeah.
right? But at various points they keep saying, oh, is this the work of the enemy? Are these snowstorms actively trying to keep us from crossing? And Gandalf basically says, yeah, they're trying to keep us from crossing, but not everything evil in the world is allied with Sauron. Caradhras is an evil spirit on its own. It is a spirit and a place in itself. And I always saw this as like there are places in this world that are not hospitable to human habitation. Parts of the Himalayas, high peaks and things were above, where there's suitable oxygen, or, you know, islands that don't grow food for us, and parts of the deep ocean where we just can't live, right? And those places aren't necessarily inherently evil. In Tolkien's world they are, but they're just, and again, the world itself is not under an obligation to be hospitable to us,
Mhm.
right? And like we were talking about with Tom Bombadil, basically our worries are beneath them, beneath the spirits of the world. Our little conflicts are not their fucking problem.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's almost what's going on with Kahadras. It doesn't want them on its slopes, and it's going, cool, get off my fucking lawn.
Cool indeed. And then
Well,
they get
yeah.
snowed in more or less, and Legolas just kind of frolics over the snow because he can do that. He does a little tee and, you know, what's the skips away in his little elf shoesies. He's not even wearing boots because he's a
Right, and
special
if they
boy.
were all elves, they might have had a hope, but they're not.
Mhm.
The storm just keeps getting worse and worse, and it says at one point it was like they hunkered down and everything sort of like calmed down, and then said they had barely gone a furlong of distance before things started up again.
How far is a furlong? I don't
I
know.
did look this up.
I figured you might.
It is an eighth of a mile,
Oh,
or
okay.
220 yards, or approximately 201 meters, or 660 feet.
Yeah, that's not very far.
No, it's really not a long distance. So they don't get very far, and it becomes very obvious that the mountain itself is keeping them from going on.
Yeah.
And it
And
gets worse and worse. And the last line of the chapter is Caradhras had defeated them because
mhm.
they were to go back down. At one point, Gimli literally calls out to the mountain, "Enough, enough!" cried Gimli. "We are departing as quickly as we may." Basically says, don't kill us. We'll go.
Yeah,
Fine.
we're leaving.
Which leaves them eventually to what happens next chapter, which will be a journey in the dark.
Mhm.
So, Sam, do you have anything else we want to talk about for this section of Fellowship?
See, I think my last little thing was that Aragorn and Boromir make a path in the snow, but they don't have shovels or anything, so they just dig. And I'm imagining them both just kind of doing windmill arms and just.
Literally, at one point, Boromir was like, "We're brave and we're strong. but you might have been better served by a bunch of less brave and less strong men who had shovels.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
and I think
they
one more
are
thing that I'll oh,
mm,
sorry, you go.
just they're not able to make it over the mountain. They
Yeah.
can't go over it. They can't go around it. They
Gotta
have to
go through
go
it.
under it.
And my last thing that we don't have time to dig into, but I am just going to put a pin in as a theme because I'm sure we'll see it more, is the sort of ceremonial blessing-y language that Elrond uses to send them off. If there's one thing I fucking love, it's a blessing. Because as a religious studies person, it just scratches an itch in my brain. I love it. I love marking a momentous occasion with a really thoughtful and intentional speech. And we'll dig into that more at future times, but I just want to put that on our radar as something that I'm aware of and something that I'm following because I fucking love it so
Oh, I
much.
love that too, and I think as a pair of ex-Christians, we've talked about, like, our need for still having some sort of, like, ceremony or religiosity that punctuates our worlds and our daily lives and our, um, th the turning of our years, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I love the ceremonial nature of it all. It's very
Yeah,
fun.
we'll get into that more when we have more time, but that's something that I'm thinking about. Did you have anything else from these sections?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I'm excited to dig into, what happens in Moria, pun only sort of intended. Realized as soon as I said the word dig and decided to stick with it. So, I guess with that, we'll leave our listeners for 2 weeks. We'll be back in 2 weeks with the journey through Moria, the next 2 chapters. But until then, Sam, where can they find us on the internet?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. I don't remember what our social medias are. You're in charge of those. What do we have? We have Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at fanappod, FANAPPPOD. And we have an email, which I think is thefandomapprentice at gmail.com.
Yes, it
Yes? Question
is.
mark? Okay, it has the.
Uh-huh.
It's not just Fandom Apprentice, it's the Fandom Apprentice.
As I go to check. It is the Fandom Apprentice at gmail.com.
Perfect. There we go. So you can go to all of those places and hang out with us and see the pictures of things that we're baking that are loosely Hobbit related and, whatever thirst inducing pictures of elves we can find. All that good stuff.
Lots of elf ass. Um, I will promise and not deliver on the elf ass.
And like when episodes are going to be posted and stuff, but mostly the elf ass.
You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, numerous other apps, I assume, out. If you're listening to us, I assume you found us. But we would also really appreciate it if you would leave us a written review and a 5-star rating if you enjoy what you're hearing. And if you spread the word about the podcast to your friends and loved ones and enemies, doesn't matter. So long as they can listen and enjoy what they're hearing, we really appreciate it. So
Yeah.
thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time, I guess.
See you next time.
Bye. The Phantom Apprentice is produced and edited by Rin and Sam. Our music was composed and performed by James, and our art is by Casey Turgeon. This podcast is created for non-commercial entertainment purposes, and the opinions expressed therein are our own and are not reflective of the opinions of any other person or organization. The content discussed is the property of the Tolkien estate and is used here under fair use.